The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Now, here's Carl Gallops.
All right, welcome back. Gulf Coast, welcome back, America. And I know that drives the liberals out of their minds that I know who I am. See, most liberals don't know who they are. I mean, they're angry. They're miserable people. And I am on a first-name basis with God. I am, because I have a personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Oh, I know that infuriates liberals, but that's okay. You'll get over it. I'm so glad that you're listening today, and I know you're listening because my next guest, Mike Zullo, infuriates you as well, and you listen to every word he says. My next guest is Mike Zullo, the lead investigator of the Obama fraud case, Sheriff Arpaio, Maricopa County cold case posse. Mike Zullo, welcome to Freedom Friday this afternoon.
Carl, how are you today?
I'm doing great. As you can tell, I'm feeling a little froggy. Well, you know, Mike, listen, I'm gonna start this segment by doing this. Last Friday, I told the folks that you would probably be here this Friday, that I would call you, and you graciously agreed. Thank you. I know you're so busy, but thank you so much. Almost every time I ask you to come on, you've accommodated me. But last Friday, I told them about the phone call, which I was privy to listen in on, and it wasn't like a little spy caper. I mean, I was on the phone with you. We were talking about some of the latest breaking details in this Obama fraud case, and one of the Obots who had your phone number through a connection in the past, and I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to give him any credit or any undue publicity, but I'm just going to call him an Obot, a rather a prominent Obot, whatever that means. They're pretty much irrelevant. But anyway, this guy calls while I'm talking to you, and you said, Carl, so-and-so's on the phone. He's trying to get me. Will you stay on and be my witness to this conversation? And I said, yeah. Do you want me to say anything? And you said, no, just listen. I said, okay. So I did. And to make a long story short, the basic thing, this guy came on and he just launched into you. And said you were a liar, and you were this, and you were that, and you were a fraud, and you were deceiving people. And then we finally got to what the whole call was about. He said, is Carl Gallops a spokesperson for you? Isn't that amazing? I mean, all I am is a radio host. I mean, you come on my show. Why would he think I'm a spokesperson for you? Carl Gallops, a spokesperson for you. And then he said, I want to know, am I a suspect in your investigation? Am I a person of interest? Now, Mike, I need you to do two things. First of all, vindicate me and let the people know that I'm telling them the truth about this, that actually happened. And then number two, I want to ask your professional opinion as a professional lawman, investigator, chief investigator of the cold case posse, Obama fraud case. Why would somebody do that? Why would they call the lead investigator of a case that goes all the way to the White House and ask if they were a suspect? So number one, did that really happen? And number two, what's your opinion about why somebody would do that?
Yeah, it really did happen, Carl, and I have the phone logs to prove it. Actually, I was going through a car wash as I was talking to you when he did, call in. He actually called me, though, about a minute and a half prior to me calling you. It was about a 39-second conversation asking me right off the bat if you were a spokesman for me, and I just refused to give him any information.
Right.
In the second phone call, like you heard, I refused to give him any information, and then he just went off and started, using profanity and didn't like the answers that I was telling him. But what I think chapped him more than anything else is when I did tell him I'm going to share one piece of information with you, and I said it to the effect of, your little Xerox caper isn't cutting it. Well, he just blew a gasket.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that's when he really went off.
Yeah.
And that was after asking like 3 or 4 times if he was a person of interest or a suspect or whatever. The phone call took me by surprise. I can't imagine what you would be so worried about unless you have something to be worried about.
I heard that. I mean, why would, I guess you just answered it, but why would anybody in their right mind, and of course wording it that way may answer the question too, but why would anybody in their right mind call the lead investigator of a criminal investigation that goes all the way to the White House and ask if they're a suspect in the case? Why would they do that?
Well, Carl, I really think that this individual has a sense of, exaggerated self-importance.
Yeah.
I think he sees him as some type of important, pivotal figure in a fight that's going on in his mind.
Right.
I mean, he's painted me as an adversary. I'm not an adversary.
Right.
I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm an investigator.
Right.
This is what I do.
Right.
And he likes to boast about what he knows and who he knows and what he does.
Right.
And he just needs a strong feeling of importance. He needs to be, important.
Right.
But let me share something else with your audience that they don't know about. About 4 hours after that phone conversation, I was advised that this individual, who will not give his real name, is afraid to give his true identity, tried to lodge a fabricated complaint against me with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
Oh, my God.
Alleging that I threatened him in that phone call.
That's interesting. I heard the whole phone call. there were no threats from you at all. That's amazing.
I know you did. And that was interesting to me. Now, you don't want to give your real name, but you want to go, and lodge complaints.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, that was a deceitful act. It was a complete falsehood, a fabrication. And what I really think it's an attempt to stop me, and it just shows a desperation in their situation.
Yeah.
They are trying desperately to mislead people, make people think that they have solved this. They have not solved this, and they're trying to do anything they can now to stop us from moving forward.
Right.
Because we are not only focused on the birth certificate.
Right. And you know what? And before this segment with you is over, this whole 30-minute segment, I'm going to address that because it really is more than just the birth certificate now, and I know there's a lot that you cannot say, but there's some general things that we can say and that I'm gonna say. We'll get to that. So, folks, if you're those of you that are listening, just hang on, because Mike and I are just setting some groundwork here. But let me just say this, Mike, for the sake of our listeners and everyone else. I am not, nor have I ever been, nor have I ever represented myself to be, nor has Mike Zullo or Sheriff Arpaio ever represented me to be any kind of official spokesperson for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office or the Cold Case Posse or for Mike Zullo or for Sheriff Arpaio. I have always been a spokesperson for myself. As you've heard Mike say, I was involved in this before Sheriff Arpaio was involved in it. But since I have come into play and have had Mike on this radio program and went to CPAC with him to assist him in that, I have given him this platform to disseminate information. The mainstream media has basically shut Arpaio and Zullo down. But Freedom Friday has now gained a huge national audience and international audience, and that infuriates the Obots that I'm giving them this platform. And I will continue to do so on Freedom Friday and P.P. Simmons. But I am not an official spokesperson. As a matter of fact, I'm always telling Mike Zullo, as I'm speaking to these things, if I make a mistake, correct me. If I say something wrong, call it, because I don't want to be wrong on this. So there you go, Mike. Have you ever designated me as an official spokesperson for you?
No, Carl, and you've never taken that role. Whatever is going on in this individual's mind, it's pretty evident that he doesn't have a good grasp on reality.
Yes. Yeah. No, I know. And I'm just, this is me. You don't have to respond to this, but I visualize him as sitting in his underwear in a tight-fitting T-shirt that in his mother's basement somewhere on a computer. You
got to stop. You're giving me a visual. You got to stop.
I know that's the visual, but that's what I see when I think. I don't want to. I'm just not going to go any further. But anyway, bottom line is, these guys apparently will go to any length to try to stop this investigation. And tell us about some of the things that have been happening in that line, because I think, personally, knowing everything I know, I think you're getting real close to uncovering you've already uncovered some huge stuff. You just haven't brought it to the proper venues yet. But I think they know that. I think they know that you have stepped all over some really big stuff that goes even beyond the birth certificate. I think it's freaking them out. What do you think?
Well, I don't know what they know or what they think, but if you think for the past 24 months, all I've been looking at is the birth certificate, you're sadly mistaken.
Right.
And that's about all I'll say, to that. It's pretty interesting. What they want to do is they want to put out roadmaps through, Internet sites, and they want us to look at these absurdities that are on these Internet sites and take their word that this is what it is.
Right.
From an anonymous source. it can't even be sourced. And they think that this is working like it's a tip line.
Right.
It's not a tip line. You don't call up here, don't give us your name, and think we're going to pursue whatever you're saying, because we're not going to do it. And let me draw a distinction here.
Right.
The people over 24 months that are on the other side of this argument, and let's just call it, for lack of a better term, I hate this term, but we'll call it the birther side versus the Obots side.
Right.
The birther side that has ever made contact with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, either through Arpaio's office directly or through me, who had information that we thought was relevant, every one of those persons not only supplied the information, they supplied their full identity, including Social Security numbers and contact information, and gave us permission to do background checks on them. And every one of those persons filled out an affidavit and swore under perjury what they were giving us to be true.
Right.
That has not happened on the other side.
Right.
And apparently the other side thinks that we're going to take whatever they put out there and we're going to blindly follow it. Well, you know what it's like? It's kind of like getting directions and then having yourself sit in the back of a limo doing about 70 miles an hour, and the headless horseman is driving.
Right.
Where do you think you're going to end up?
Right, right. And to me, this really goes to show the difference in character between the so-called birthers and the Obama bots. I mean, because the birthers, who have been an instrumental part of helping to move this forward, as you said, they've come forward. They've given you names. They've signed affidavits. They've turned over their identifying documents. Some of them have come in and sat down and sworn out affidavits and brought information. I mean, they're up front. I mean, they care about our country, our Constitution. They're willing to be wrong. They bring you stuff and they say, look, if I'm wrong, show me. Those are the birthers. On the Obot side, they're running around in the shadows, and they're lying and deceiving and calling you names and using initials and fake names, and they won't identify themselves, and they won't sign affidavits, and they won't swear to anything, yet they get on the Internet and their little chat rooms and make these grand declarations. There's a big difference in character there, isn't there, Mike?
It's a phenomenal difference, and, you have to take it from the source.
Yeah.
And look, at any time during an investigation like this, somebody could be wrong, somebody could make a mistake, something could pop up that changes the game.
Right.
But I want to be clear right now, this little Xerox thing isn't doing it.
Right.
It's not doing it.
Right.
I think that they threw their last card in the game.
Right.
By putting this thing out there.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you, they're accusing me of not standing up and taking responsibility for the challenge that I put out there very early on. And that challenge still stands.
Right.
If you think you have the formula, the recipe, if you will, for a one-button push to have a document recreate all the anomalies on Obama's birth certificate, you are more than welcome to come down to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. You can sit with me, and you can show me how it happens.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you right now, that little Xerox thing does not do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and that's the key. And for the sake of most of our listeners know what we're talking about, but for those that are just joining in saying, what are they talking about, the Xerox thing? And the Obama bots came up with this thesis, this postulation some weeks ago, that they had found a particular Xerox machine, a particular serial number, that if you place a Hawaiian birth certificate in it, and they never did say press the button once, but basically, and put out the document, that it comes out exactly the same as the document that's on the White House website. And what you're saying, Mike, is that is false. That is not true. It does not happen, particularly by putting a birth certificate in there, pushing the button once, which is all anybody would do, and then pull it off and put it on the website. It does not reproduce all of the anomalies, correct?
That is 100% correct.
Yeah. So there you go, and that's what Mike is talking about with the Xerox machine caper, something that they thought would. And I agree with you, Mike. I think that was their last ace in the hole. I think they threw that card in. But I'm going to take a break, Mike, and when we come back, I'm going to make a theory, a postulation as to why they threw that in. I've got a sneaking suspicion why they've made such a big deal out of that. So, Mike, can you hang on and be with us for a few more moments?
Yeah, absolutely, Carl.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm going to ask Mike a question that will hopefully allow him to at least speak generally to where this thing is going and perhaps some more progress that has been made. So anyway, you don't want to miss what's coming next. You're listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Mike Zullo, my guest this afternoon. We'll be right back.
We're now entering the peak of the hurricane season. Are you ready for an emergency? Get ready.
Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
And now, the Commander-in-Chief is back. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
All right, welcome back, Gulf Coast. Welcome back, America. We are live this afternoon, and my guest, of course, is Mike Zullo, the lead investigator of the cold case posse, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Maricopa County Obama fraud case. Well, Mike, so let me just, I'm going to make a general statement. I think that the Xerox caper probably was their last ace in the hole. And, you know, I've got to ask myself, and you don't have to answer any of this because it might go to your investigation. But, you know, if I'm an investigator out there, I've got to ask myself, who are these guys that all of a sudden know about a Xerox machine and an exact serial number and exactly what it will do and won't do? And why is it 5 years later that they all of a sudden know that? And why is it at this point, now that we have congressmen ready to take it before Congress, that all of a sudden they have this so-called evidence and it turns out to be a caper and they're calling your phone wanting to know if they're a suspect now? And I mean, I think this thing is really getting stirred up, Mike. But in the meantime, see, I will just ask you this very generally. Apparently, from everything else you're finding out, and it's a lot, the birth certificate thing, which is huge, is kind of the tip of the iceberg. Apparently this thing gets really dark and really deep, and your investigation is leading to some stunning connections to people, places, events, and things across this land. Can you speak to any of that?
You know, Carl, I really can't speak to it to any length, but you're not off in what you're saying. Like I said earlier, if you think that Sheriff Arpaio just had me looking at the birth certificate on the computer screen every day, you're wrong.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff here, and I think a lot of its focus on the certificate is being done for the purpose of using this as a focal point to keep attention drawn to that certificate so everything else could just go on by.
Right. And as the consummate professional investigator you are, that was one of the first red flags to you when your face was just continually being shoved into the details of that. I suppose that's when you had an aha moment, and when you started turning your head left and right, that's when other things just really, really started rolling, huh?
Well, you know, you have to look at it from my perspective is if you're on the other side, I don't care what side you are on this thing, if you're on the other side and you truly wanted to help law enforcement get to the bottom of this,
right,
you wouldn't do it the way these guys are doing it.
Right. That's the key.
You just don't.
Right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, and hear what Mike Zullo just said, folks. Now think about this. So if you're the lead investigator and you're sitting on top of this criminal case and you've got people out there saying, wait a minute, you're all wrong. You're wrong. We've got evidence to the contrary. Well, what would you do if your intentions were not nefarious? You would go into the sheriff's office. You would take your evidence. You would identify yourself. You would sign affidavits. And Mike Zullo, being the consummate professional he is, would take the evidence, would forensically examine it. And if you were right, then he would make his declarations. But that's not how they've handled it, right, Mike?
No, it's not. It's adversarial. It's disinformation. It's misinformation. It's outright condescension. I mean, it's actually, at some points, even insulting and infuriating, the way they conduct themselves. So you have to take it, again, from the source. And, you know, you ask yourself a question, you know, does the CIA take direction from the KGB?
Right.
The answer is no.
Right.
At least we hope not.
Well, I know. Hey, in the last couple of weeks, we might be
under this administration, but I don't know.
In the real world, in the America you and I grew up in the real world, the CIA doesn't take direction from the KGB. But in Obama's world, they might be.
Very well. I don't know. It's pretty. Never heard the Russian president appealing to the American people directly before.
Oh, my gosh. I know. Well, I just have a question for you, Mike, before I let you go. Am I a suspect in your case?
No, Carl, I really think I can disqualify you as that, but I can tell you this.
Yeah.
That after the last week of events, the individual that called, if you weren't, right now you look like the Hindenburg on my radar screen, and we all know what happened to the Hindenburg.
Yeah, we know what happened to the Hindenburg. Well, is Joey Wallace a suspect? I mean, I'm just crazy about this. Is Mallory Bardwell? Is she a suspect? Who?
Sometimes I have to check and make sure I'm not a suspect.
It's amazing. It is amazing. Well, Mike, listen, I'm going to give you a chance to reiterate this. I know I'm speaking from my heart, but all we want is the truth, right? I mean, truly, if forensically, verifiable evidence came in tomorrow to show that this was all a bunch of junk, you'd declare that, right? I mean, that's all you want.
Carl, I would do that tomorrow. Here's the problem with this thing. Like I said,
we've got 10 seconds, Mike. I'm sorry. We've got 10 seconds. Go ahead.
It's not just about the birth certificate. It's everything that surrounds it.
Yep.
And that's where the real problems start.
That's it. Everything that surrounds it. Mike Zullo, we'll have you back on. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thanks, Carl.
Okay, good deal. Well, folks, you have been listening to Freedom Friday live today with Carl Gallups, Joey Wallace, your producer, Mallory Bardwell, your world-famous producer. We'll be back next Friday. We'll have another great show for you. You can get all this stuff on podcast at carlgallups.com. Go to PP Simmons. We'll have a bunch of it put up there, too. See you next Friday. God bless you.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.